can start.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Welcome all the devotees to our show Rendezvous with a Devotee. So this is ISKCON San Diego Live, and we are very grateful to have His Grace Pavamana Prabhu with us.
Hare Krishna.
He is the disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. He met Srila Prabhupada in the year 1972 in Vrindavana, India, and he traveled with Srila Prabhupada across different places in India like New Delhi, Mayapur. So we would be very interested to know about his journey with Srila Prabhupada, his experiences, what he learned, what can he share with us. So I would like to welcome Prabhu. We are so grateful and so fortunate to have you here today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Hare Krishna.
So Prabhu, I'd like to start with asking you, how did you come to Krishna consciousness? How did your journey start?
Well, in 1971 or 1970, I think, I was going to San Diego State College as an engineering student. And I saw these weird people out in front of the student lounge, with their high-top tennis shoes and the robes blowing in the wind and playing these weird drums and finger cymbals, and just, with the face paint and the ponytail. I thought they must have been intoxicated or something. I don't know what to think about it. And they were chanting this mantra from the musical Hair. And because I had just seen it in 1969 in Hollywood. But anyway, later on in the dorm where I lived, there were some people talking about these weird people. And on one hand, someone said, "Oh, they're just a bunch of weirdos, who knows what they're into." But somebody else said, "Well, I talked to some of the girls, and they seemed very intelligent. They knew what they were talking about." And of course, who am I going to believe? The first guy. These people are very strange. And on another day, I was walking down the sidewalk, and there was a lot of people around, and I saw one devotee, standing there with some books. And so I thought, I'm very safe. I don't have to worry, because there's a lot of people around. And all of a sudden, they all vanished. And here I was, directly talking to this devotee. "Oh, no, I'm not interested. I'm a student, So a couple of encounters like that. But I wasn't ready. So later on, I moved to Los Angeles, and I dropped out of school. I wasn't sure I wanted to be an engineer. And I was very depressed because I didn't know where my life was going, because, for so many years you go to high school and you're on a track, I'm going to be an engineer. So anyway, one day I was living in Westwood in LA, and there was a knock on the door, and my roommate jumped up and opened the door, and it was just Hare Krishna. You have to be kidding me. That's what I was thinking. Oh, no. So, "Oh, come on in, tell us what you're all about. What's your thing? What's your bag, man?" That was the jargon of the day. And so he came in, and he said, "Do you want to see a picture of God?" Of course, so I grew up a Christian. We don't have pictures of God in Christianity. Okay, Christ, some people believe that Christ was God. Okay. So he pulls out a picture of the little deities from the LA temple. Completely incomprehensible to me, but anyway. So he started he pulled out a book, Bhagavad Gita, and they said, "This is our scripture. We read this every day." And it had a nice clear cover on it, but it was a paperback. So I'm thinking, a paperback book I could have bought anywhere at a alternate book type store, and this is their scripture. Where's the gold binding and the fancy onion skin? But that's all they had at the time. It was just a paperback abridged version. So he was preaching and saying that, happiness is always right off the end of your fingertips. And everything he said, I had to agree. Of course, I was a little taken back by his appearance, but he said, he looked me right in the eye. He said, "You look like you're interested. You should read this book." And at the time, I was reading, this and that. I said, "Well, okay, I'm always good for a good book, So anyway, I bought the book, and he invited me and my roommate to the temple the next day. It was like a Saturday afternoon just before Christmas. So, and he also said, if you try this chanting, if you chant 5 minutes a day, at the end of a week you'll see a change in your consciousness. I didn't know what that meant, but anyway. So the next day came along, and, I'm tired. It's Sunday afternoon. "Yeah, man, let's go and check this out." "Oh, no, we gotta go. So we drove down there, and we're parked across the street in L.A. Temple at Watsik Avenue. Okay, and we're looking over at the building, and all of a sudden, a door bursts open, and the devotee ran out. And if you know the L.A. Temple, there's 2 buildings, and there's like a corridor in between. Yeah. So the door bursts open. This devotee runs out, disappears into the door on the other building. And then a minute or 2 later, he runs back. And we're thinking, wow, there's a lot of energy going on over there. So somehow we got we went inside, and there was a lecture, about the Vedas, and everybody's falling asleep. So I also nodded out like everybody else. And then they had the Artik, and in my area where I lived, it was a white ghetto. Okay, I didn't know any. There were no black people, there were no Indian people, no Asian people, except for there were a few Japanese. So all of a sudden, there's all these Indian people there, and they're putting on the face paint, in the hallway, and you go in the temple room, and there's clouds and billows of smoke everywhere, and people dancing. The kirtan started, and it's dancing, like crazy, and so it was quite a exciting but bewildering experience. And afterwards, when it was over, everybody bows down, Jai Om Vishnu a bunch of gibberish. And I'm like, this is crazy, right? So then there was afterwards we went back into the other room. It used to be a school auditorium. Okay, so we're sitting in those kind of chairs. And then in the prasadam, and where's the meat? I was a staunch meat eater. I didn't like. If I knew it was vegetarian, I wouldn't have come. That's how bad I was. So anyway, so the only thing I liked was the pudding. And then this person I was sitting next to, he started preaching to us and showing us all the pictures around the room. The picture of the sun god on his chariot riding across the sky. And there's a lot of these pictures, and we're like, just gobsmacked. Anyway, so at the time, unfortunately, I was kind of a pothead. And so we went home and did the thing. And I realized immediately that this was not compatible. I was very excited. We were giddy. Realized this is not compatible. So during the week, I started, I was going to school downtown Los Angeles, and I would chant in my car to the melody that was on the album Hair. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Very, very nice tune. And after a few days, the clouds of depression in my mind just lifted. And I said, there's something to this. I'm actually feeling, happier.
That is amazing.
And so I was like, well, okay. So, and I started reading Bhagavad Gita. And I'd go to school in the morning, and I'd have maybe an hour or so in between, and I'd have to go to work. I was a pump jockey. In the old days when you used to go to the filling station and the attendant would pump the gas for you. And so I'd come home and read a few verses from Bhagavad Gita, and it was just like a whole world opened up. I grew up a Christian, but here's, about a personal God, and there's life on other planets, and all about karma and reincarnation and previous lives, and all this information all in one place. And wow, it was just mind-blowing. And so I started coming to the classes. They had classes during the week that one devotee, Karandar, was giving. And I'd meet the devotee that I had met the first day, and he was always there when I went there. So it was really nice to have somebody to relate to. He was a ex-hippie. Okay, he'd gone beyond hippie. Whoa, I wanted to be a hippie, but he was beyond it. So that was very comforting. Okay. And you kind of feel, when you come to the temple, it's kind of like in this bubble. I mean, L.A. is like, what can you say about L.A.? It's hell. But this little bubble at the temple is like very serene. And he used to tell me this, we're in the crest of a wave. This is just getting started. We're just, it's beginning. And then after a little while, he said, Srila Prabhupada is coming. Wow. The guru. He's going to be here. I think he said like in May or something. And so that was going to be a big deal. Okay. So I kept coming, and I kept chanting. And one day one of the devotees said, you've been coming a lot. Why don't you join? And I didn't have anything else to say. I said, well, okay. And then I just quit school, gave away whatever little things I had, and then whatever I thought would be useful, I brought to the temple, and I moved
Those
in.
days, if you're coming, you have to join the temple, right? It was like either here or there.
Well, yeah. I mean, it wasn't exactly the most popular thing to do. And I remember that I had cut my hair. I think I went to the barber. I don't know what. Cut my hair short, just to kind of see if it was going to be okay. Because I was really attached to my hair, long sideburns and the whole thing. And my roommates were teasing me. Oh, you're going to become one of those guys, ha ha ha. It was a joke, right? So, but yeah, I moved in, and then. Shortly thereafter, a few weeks later, I was sent to Fresno. They had a temple in Fresno. And I was there for about maybe a month or so. And then we were on traveling, preaching in Sacramento. And we got a call from Los Angeles that that Srila Prabhupada is asking that the movement send 50 devotees to India to help with building temples. And so they closed Fresno, they closed Sacramento, they closed Santa Barbara, and sent all the devotees to Los Angeles to collect funds to go. And so that's how I ended up going to India. So, kind of a short synopsis.
No, thank you so much for that. One thing I wanted to ask, and especially for the young devotees, that they have a lot of peer pressure. Like you said, your roommates used to make fun of you, right? So a lot of the young devotees I have seen, they face through these challenges, and they kind of succumb to that. So how did you handle that kind of pressure, and how you came above and beyond it?
Well, I'm kind of a loner type, sometimes being kind of a weirdo helps. If you're trying to be Mr. Popularity, and have people follow you and stuff, that's a different story. but being kind of an oddball, it wasn't too hard. And, my parents, my mother, as soon as I got interested, my mother got a Bhagavad Gita, and she read it, and she wanted to know what I was into, what was this all about, because it wasn't Christian. And in high school, I was very active in our church group. In fact, the youth minister became my best friend, and we used to do a lot of things together. We kind of adopted him in the family. So, being around, religious people and this kind of thing was not a foreign thing to me. But the only thing is that he was, of course, quite disappointed that I took this left turn into being a Hare Krishna, like join the circus or something. But that was not too much of a problem. But I do know that there, in some families, especially in the Indian families, a very strong family attachment. So becoming a devotee, a Hare Krishna devotee, it's becoming a monk. You are basically renouncing the society in general, the pull towards sense gratification and all the enjoyable things of the world, in favor of going inward and self-realization, and also helping to spread this consciousness. So it requires a commitment. You're kind of swimming upstream. So yeah, it is difficult, but especially in Indian families, know what it's all about. Aware of the sages and scriptures and holy men and things that Westerners are really not much aware of. It's kind of a hodgepodge out there. But I went to India a few years ago, and I was talking to some of the brahmacharis. I tell them, when people come to the temple, this is family. We're part of a big family. I mean, Krishna is our father, and so we should not. I know there's a lot of stress taking tests to get into college or whatever. I don't know the full extent of it, but there's a lot of pressure there. So the tendency to, be a little competitive. We're all family. Someone comes to the temple, this is someone that we're attached to. It's very personal. It's very personal. And some of the brahmacharis a few days later told me that they went on a program, and they had taken my advice, and they brought home 2 or 3 potential devotees. So it's really important to have this personal connection. That's in any church or religious organization, or any organization, it's all about the people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that point. Even like I work in the corporate, and relationship means a lot. Teamwork, working together, that means a lot. Yeah. So moving to the next part. So you mentioned 50 devotees were planned to send to India.
Yes.
So, and I know in 72 you met Srila Prabhupada. So would you like to share some of those experiences, meeting Prabhupada for the first time?
Yes. So I was living in Bombay. It was called Bombay at the time. And in the month of Kartik, Srila Prabhupada came. I had missed him because he came to Los Angeles, and I had gone to India in the meantime. And so Srila Prabhupada came to Vrindavana during the month of Kartik. And so the arrangement was that devotees would come and spend a week or two and then come back, and then some more devotees, it was a trading off. So about the second or third week of Kartik, I went to Vrindavana with Hari Kesha, brahmachari at the time. And so Srila Prabhupada was giving lectures in the morning on the Srimad Bhagavatam, and in the afternoon on the Nectar of Devotion. And it was all recorded. There was very wonderful tapes of his lectures during that time. But the first thing that I remember, seeing Srila Prabhupada for the first time, as he began to speak, I realized that there's no difference between reading his book and hearing him speak. It's exactly the same thing, and he's, here is in person, And so during that month, also during there were sometimes engagements. We would go to people's homes for lunch or something like that. And in the evening, he would also give darshan in his room. So all the devotees, there were, I think probably, I'm going to say, maybe 15 or so devotees there at the time, coming and going again. So we were able to sit in Srila Prabhupada's room, and he would give darshan. Anybody who wanted to come and speak to him. So Prabhupada, was very intimate, and a lot of, it was just intoxicating being with Prabhupada. It was a very small room. It was, we were just packed in there. So, but during in the morning, sometimes he'd go on on a morning walk, and he would point out things, in Prabhupada's books, he talks about, hogs and dogs. You go to Vrindavana, there's the hogs, and there's the dogs in the gutter, eating stool. And all the things that Prabhupada talks about that you don't see much in the Western world, okay, because the sewer is open, that sort of thing. And a lot of different things that Prabhupada would talk about. But he would walk, right along the Jamuna, where Krishna, jumped into the water. There's the tree that he climbed up and jumped in there, So that was, it was really, really amazing. And before we had the temple, we had the temple property at the time when I went there, but they had only poured a little bit of the foundation, Later on, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but when Prabhupada laid the foundation, they always have a ceremony, and they put the Nantashesh and different articles in the bottom of the hole. And so I was living in Delhi at the time, so my friend and I left for a day or two to watch Prabhupada do that. But Srila Prabhupada was, it's hard to explain. Physically, he was not very tall. 5'2", okay? Smaller than any of us here. But his presence was gigantic. Srila Prabhupada was a titan. And being in his presence like being in front of a volcano. There was just so much energy. And he used to walk, before I joined, they had some videos or, films of him walking, and his young disciples could hardly keep up. One of the things he liked to do was going on walks, and in the beginning he walked very fast, hardly keep up. So one time, while I was there, they wanted to whitewash his rooms. In India, a lot of times they don't use paint; they just use whitewash. Because that's much cheaper. So Srila Prabhupada was resting at the time, and I wasn't sure because that would make noise or something, but he said, just go on. But when Srila Prabhupada would rest, he was not in a state of sleep that we know it. He was more or less in a state of samadhi. He was perfectly conscious. He was never unconscious or in the mode of ignorance. Srila Prabhupada was not under the modes of nature. Okay? Srila Prabhupada, being a pure devotee, because when you are fully surrendered to Krishna, all of your senses are controlled by Krishna. Okay? And Srila Prabhupada could see things, and he knew things that we could not understand how he knew. There was an example in Los Angeles. He was sitting on the opposite end of the room, and he said, there's some sandalwood in Krishna's eye. You could not see it. No one could see that far. How did he know that there was some sandalwood in Krishna's eye? And of course they checked, and there was. So Srila Prabhupada is in direct contact with Krishna. And one devotee asked him when we were in Vrindavana in his room, he said, what does it mean that the spiritual master is, the super soul? He's the manifestation of the super soul. He said that the spiritual master is not God, but is representing God. So he is as good as God. Okay? So the spiritual master is not, by definition, an ordinary human being. Okay? He's the external representative of the super soul. So he's saying what the super soul would tell you if you could hear it. Okay? We're not hearing super soul. Okay? Krishna gives us independence. He's not going to interfere. So the spiritual master comes to tell us what the super soul would tell us if we could hear it. And that's how he explained it. So the spiritual master he said, there's no business, has no business other than Krishna. To speak what Krishna speaks and to do Krishna's work. There's no sense gratification. It doesn't even come up, And he was criticized for having female disciples and things like this, and giving sannyas or Brahmin initiation. Very controversial. Very, very controversial. And he would admonish us too. He would say, we're getting, people are looking at us, so you have to behave properly. Okay? And so all these things that Prabhupada did were adjustments. He never, like for example, the Parampara system, he would never break that. He would never dare. Giving it initiation to disciples and allowing his disciples to accept disciples. That's the Parampara. He would not, but he made adjustments. He saw in the Western countries that women were going to be around. And so he didn't try to artificially, separate things. Okay? But again, we have our history, which is sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But Srila Prabhupada he was compassionate on an intense level. He was intensely compassionate. He wanted everyone, anyone, even the animals. There were things that he would do that we couldn't understand, because he wanted, he wanted everyone and everything to benefit. He didn't want to, want animals to be harmed in any way, And one time, later on, when we got the Bhaktivedanta Manor in England, went on a morning walk, and he walked past a big tree. And he said, you see this tree? If you ask him, are you happy? He'll say yes. But look at his condition. He's sitting out in the middle of, it's very cold in the winter, very hot in the summer, But because he's in the mode of ignorance, he doesn't understand that. Okay? So how does he know what the tree's thinking? But Srila Prabhupada had the ability to see things and perceive things. He was extremely perceptive about everything. He was extremely observant. Nothing ever got past him, and you could never fool Srila Prabhupada. Okay? He was never in the mode of ignorance. Okay? The pure devotee has all the mystic powers, and he never exhibited them. He never, would levitate or do mystic tricks, but he certainly could have. But it would have not been favorable for his preaching mission. But back in the day of the Christianity, Jesus did some tricks to get people to follow him, but Srila Prabhupada didn't need to do that. But he certainly had enough mystic power to understand every nook and corner of the world. He knew what was going on in every center and everything. We could not understand that. So we're under the modes of nature. We're using our senses. We think we know everything coming through our senses. Prabhupada didn't rely on his senses. That's the difference. So, in effect, Srila Prabhupada could not make a mistake. And making a mistake means a conditioned soul. It means you imperfect senses, you make mistakes, right? You become illusioned and tendency to cheat. And Prabhupada had none of those. He did not ever. He was not, oh, gee, gosh darn, I made a mistake. You will never see that coming from Prabhupada. And we have enough videos. You'll never see Prabhupada lament, oh. You know, but he did a lot of things that were bold. Again, you know, marrying his disciples. Later on, he stopped it. But he did things not because in the future he knew what was going to happen. He knows past, present, and future. But he gave us the opportunity. Okay. He doesn't, just like Krishna, he's not going to interfere with our independence. Okay. But we were unable to come up to the standard in many cases. So, but it wasn't a mistake. The mistake was our fault. But saying that, somebody gets initiated sannyas and later they fell down, well, that was Prabhupada's mistake. That's not Prabhupada's mistake. Okay, that was his compassion. Okay, so anyhow, then that was the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada, and then later on, when the program was over, Shamsundar, Prabhupada's main secretary, had arranged somehow in 3 other cities around India the huge pandal program. I know the Indians know what a pandal is. Americans think like a circus tent, big, like a block square, huge, humongous tent. And in each city, we traveled on a train to Hyderabad, and they would have in the morning and the evening they would have people would come, and Prabhupada would lecture. And Srila Prabhupada would speak in the local language. I don't know how many languages Prabhupada actually knew. He obviously knew Hindi, and they knew Bengali. I'm not sure about Urdu, but he would say the same things to the Indians. He would say, you're born in India. It's your duty. Lord Chaitanya said it's your duty if you're born in India to help spread Krishna consciousness and become a guru and spread Krishna consciousness. I think the term guru is a little more loosely applied, but so probably a couple weeks in Hyderabad, and after that we went back to Bombay for a few days, and then we went to Ahmedabad, and they had another program there in Ahmedabad. And during the day, again, life members or potential life members would invite us to come. And Srila Prabhupada used to sit separately. He would take prasad here, and the other devotees would be over there. But this one day, I forget where it was, we were all sitting in the same room, and Prabhupada was sitting, maybe a couple devotees between me and Srila Prabhupada in the end. And I was always sick in India. I had dysentery and everything. But I couldn't help myself. They pulled out this feast. Everything you can imagine. And some things are difficult and expensive in India, like nuts and dried fruit and fruits and things. So they had literally, they just pulled out all the stops. So when I was eating there, and Prabhupada's eating, and at the end it was like I had to come around and they plop more on your plate, right? So you have to prevent them. But I had one puri left on my plate, and I kind of leaned back and like, yeah. And Srila Prabhupada leaned over. He said, "Oh, you cannot finish?" "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." So I'm muttering under my breath, I don't know if I can digest this, but I ate it anyway. Prabhupada didn't like it if you didn't eat all the prasadam on your plate. He did not like to waste anything, especially prasadam. So that was my little anecdote.
Did you end up finishing it?
I'm sorry?
Did you end up eating that puri?
Yes, I did. I couldn't refuse. So I got initiated. I was in September in Bombay, first initiation, and Achyutananda did the Swami at the time did the fire sacrifice. After we went to Ahmedabad, and Prabhupada called us the dancing white elephants, right? Just showing off these American devotees, these white-skinned devotees, to try to get them to wake up. It's like, hey, if these people, these Americans that you want to be like Americans, here are some Americans and they're becoming devotees, so you should become like them. So we were the dancing white elephants. We pretty much actually useless. So anyway, and then but after that we went back to Bombay for the third Pandal program. Okay, and again there was enough room in that tent for 20,000 people. Now Americans can't imagine 20,000 people can be in a tent. But if you've ever been to India and see how compact and how packed it can be, they had 20,000 people. Now, not every night, but the last night, the final night, Srila Prabhupada had given a lecture, and the devotees were putting on a play, a little skit, that Krishna is ill, and he needs to cure his headache. He has to have the dust from the devotees' feet. Right? So all the Brahmins would say, no, that is not stated in Veda. But they would go to the gopis, yes, we get the dust of our feet, we don't care if we go to hell. And after the play was over, they started kirtan. Now there's some very expert kirtaneers in that party, with Chudananda and Dinanath and some other famous devotees. And they just cooked up this kirtan that was just smoking. And Srila Prabhupada was sitting, in the front row. I was also sitting in the front row. And Srila Prabhupada leaped up on the stage and started dancing. And I swear it was like they lit off a bomb in there. Everybody just jumped up, and the whole place with 20,000 people jumping and dancing and chanting. And Prabhupada's chanting on the stage. And the deity's on a little throne, and the throne is shaking because the stage is shaking. And he went around a couple times. He circumambulated the deities, and by the way, those deities ended up in the Bhaktivedanta manor. That's that particular set of deities. But anyway, so it was just unbelievable, just complete. I'm going to say bedlam. It wasn't bedlam, but it was just incredible. So I give all credit to Shyama Sundar. And for arranging these programs. Just arranging anything in India is like standing in a concrete block. Hard to get anything done. But he was able to advertise it, and in India, people want to hear a sadhu. It doesn't matter who it is. They want to hear a holy man. So it was very, very, very popular. Okay. And a few times around that time, once Srila Prabhupada came where we were staying, a little preaching center, and Prabhupada showed up. So then I moved to Delhi, and in March 1973, went to Mayapur for the I think it was the second Mayapur festival, and that's where I got initiated, second initiated there. And so that was very nice. So later on, I moved to Delhi, and then I was invited to go to Mayapur by Jai Pataka. He wanted Prabhupada wanted devotees to learn how to make mridangas. So I went there, and I spent about 3 months trying to learn how to make mridangas. But I was always very sick and emaciated. It takes a lot of physical strength and stamina to make one. So anyway, eventually I decided I had to leave. I weighed about 100 pounds. And on my way back to Los Angeles, I heard that if you go to London, you can get join a travel club and you get a discount. So I landed in London and learned that Srila Prabhupada was was there at the Bhaktivedanta Manor that had recently been donated by George Harrison. So I went there, stayed for a month while they were preparing the temple. And almost daily, I got to go on like a morning walk. Prabhupada was there pretty much all the time. I don't think there were no life members or anything like that to go to, so pretty much he was there most of the time. So at one point, Prabhupada heard that I had learned maybe I had learned to make mridangas. Somebody, because I'd been in Mayapur. So he called for me. So he was out on the lawn, and I paid my obeisances, and he said, you learned how to make mridanga? Well, Srila Prabhupada, I watched the guy, doing the leather work, but making the shells was pretty difficult. But I'm on my way to Los Angeles, and I plan to get a potter's wheel and make the shells on the potter's wheel. So Srila Prabhupada looked at me and he said, that is a machine. Machines are for experts, not for neophytes. Okay, well, I got to think fast. Okay, so I could get a kick wheel. You push it with your foot. Still, that is a machine. Machines are for experts, not for neophytes. I didn't know what to say. So he turned to Srila Kirti. He couldn't do it. Srila Kirti said, no, Srila Prabhupada, you couldn't do it. So I discovered that I had this mystic power to shrink. I shrunk between the blades of grass. I didn't know what to say. It's like, okay. Well, I paid my obeisances, and pretty much that was my closest pastime, But I did try later on to do. I helped make some Balaram drums with another devotee. I made my own kind of drum, but so that was that. Then going back to Los Angeles, Srila Prabhupada, of course, came later in December 73, and in 74, 75, and 76. And that was the last time I saw Srila Prabhupada, in 1976. But I got to go on a few morning walks in Los Angeles. I don't remember too much, but that's kind of the end of that story. So
thank you, Prabhu, so much. That was a very sweet time about the mridanga with Srila Prabhupada. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then I also wanted to ask is, what are the few things that you would like to share with our audience, with the devotees, that they can imbibe in their life to be happy devotees? So
I would just say that get some literature, read Prabhupada's books, chant Hare Krishna. If you don't want anyone to know, just go off somewhere. This course, in those days, it was not very popular at all, so I kind of kept to myself. But if you find something in it, tell somebody. Tell somebody. Tell them what you found, whatever realization that you have. If you can share a book or something like that. It doesn't require to give up anything. My case, my life had already fallen apart. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give up your job or your family or anything else. If you have strong family ties, try to make them devotees. If you want to experience Krishna consciousness more seriously, then there are 4 things that are not recommended. Eating animal flesh. If you can become a vegetarian. I was not a vegetarian before. And like I said, if I knew it was vegetarian, I wouldn't come to the Sunday feast. But I met a devotee later on, they said, before I joined, and he said, asked me if I ate meat, and I said yes. And he said, if you think about it, that you're causing these animals to suffer so much just so you can taste their flesh. You should not do that. and I never ate meat after that moment. Never. I didn't know how to cook. We have a cookbook, Hare Krishna cookbook, and there are lots of vegetarian cookbooks. You don't have to cook Indian style necessarily, but that's one thing. Illicit sex, that is not recommended. These things I'm saying are counterproductive for spiritual life. So sometimes it takes a while. I mean, I was smoking, marijuana and doing other things, intoxicating myself, but I gave it up because I could see it was not compatible. But I had to, kind of like, okay, this is a kind of a weaning period. Okay, all right, I'm going to give this up. It may take some time. Don't feel discouraged. You can only advance. Even if you're still addicted to these things, if you simply chant Hare Krishna, what happens is you lose the taste for it. Yes. And another thing that can happen is you find that you're becoming interested in this kind of thing. Those who don't share the same mentality or the same interest, you may find that their friendship may wane. We don't reject anyone, but sometimes they're not comfortable with, being too much into God, especially maybe a girlfriend or something like that. And your parents may not understand, but it's a gradual thing. And again, joining and becoming a monk, now that's a pretty serious thing to do. Okay. And we have devotees who come regularly. They live outside. I live outside now. I'm married. I have a business, and but anyone can live wherever and come to the temple. Read Prabhupada's books, and also, like we're doing right now, online. The great resource. Anytime, day and night, you can access all kinds of videos and Zoom classes and everything else. So there's no reason to feel strange or an anxiety that you want to become more serious. Sometimes in families, maybe you want to give up eating meat, but your spouse or your family is not used to that. It's a little kind of a sticky situation, but as long as you're enthusiastic, that's the main thing. If you're enthusiastic about it and you're happy, it's contagious. Everybody wants to be happy, right? But sometimes, the outward appearance is a little off-putting. I remember when I first started coming to the temple, I was kind of feeling strange, but I felt within myself that I was home. I felt that in spite of what is going on in my mind, in my heart, I was feeling secure. I was feeling that this is good. This is these people are speaking the truth. They're sincere. They're warm-hearted. And that's what I was saying in the beginning, is that it's all about the people. If you've got someone that you feel comfortable with, that you feel, that you can trust, okay, and they're happy, and I didn't. There's one thing I didn't mention when I first started reading Bhagavad Gita. Every page says, devotional service is the only way to understand God. So what is this devotional type service they talk about? So I called the temple. And I get somebody on the phone and said, well, why don't you come down on Saturday and we can explain everything. Okay, so I came down on Saturday, and I went in the office, and the temple president was there, Jaitirtha. And Jaitirtha says, well, Prabhu, can you show this nice young man to the kitchen? Show him some devotional service. So I took him around the corner to the kitchen, and there was a mountain of pots. And they had outfitted a regular kitchen, but where they were washing the pots, because the building was formerly a church, and if you know these, the classrooms, they have these little tiny sinks, right? It's only about 12 inches, right? And they have a little, pipe, faucet, And so I have a pot this big, and the sink is this big. I'm supposed to wash the pot. Okay, I get it. Devotional service. Okay. And then later on in the afternoon, we got promoted upstairs, literally. Okay, so devotees had accounts at a lot of the head shops. You know, they're selling pipes and rolling paper for people who were, you know, smoking marijuana. How they were legal, I don't know, but anyway. But we would sell posters and incense in these shops, right? So the posters they would roll up and put a plastic sleeve over it and put a label on it, right? And then that was, you know, put it on a display. So we got to roll the posters on this machine. Oh, this is so cool. And all day long, these other two devotees, they played the Happening album, the one album that they had just recorded, on a record player, and they would simply all afternoon play one side, turn it over, play the other side, you know, and the Brahma Samhita, you know, and then on the other side it was the translation, you know, I forget exactly, you know, the transcendental autocrat is forever inviting the conditioned souls to associate with him, you know. And when this was over, this is what my point I'm trying to get to. When the afternoon was over and it was time for the evening artik, they go into the temple room and the devotees were going to chant, I suddenly felt just so ecstatic. Now I get it. I know why these people are jumping up and down and chanting so crazily, because I'm feeling it. Okay? And so in the development of faith, okay, it's not armchair. We're not, you know, speculating on something, you know, like a theological, you know, theosophical society or something. We're actually feeling something. The jumping and dancing is not artificial, okay? And so that was once you get to that point that you can't deny, okay? It's not like something, well, I accept it today, and you know, but yeah, that was yesterday. Not like a fad, you know what I mean? You actually are experiencing something concrete, okay? And once you get to that point, okay, there's no going back, really, because it's, okay, I tried those other things. You know, I did the rock and roll and, you know, all that stuff. Yeah. And it wasn't satisfying, and I knew it wasn't satisfying, and at the time I thought, I was telling myself, if I find something better, I'm going to do it. Just smoking dope is just ridiculous, you know, it's... you know, and the other half of the story is that I got in trouble, caught with possession of marijuana that summer, before I met the devotees. So I was facing a felony. Okay, so you know, I never got in trouble growing up, and all of a sudden, you know, I wound up in jail, and my life was falling apart fast. So you know, by Krishna's grace, you know, he sent the devotee, you know, to go door to door in Westwood. If I'd answered the door, I would have shut it in his face. But Krishna had a plan. So, whatever way you come to Krishna consciousness, everyone's life is under control, whether we realize it or not. Okay, and if you want to be a bank robber, or you want to, you know, be the next, you know, Olympic swimmer, or whatever it is you want to do, Krishna will help you. But especially if you are inclined at all, if you meet a devotee, or even if you just think a good thought, that is huge. We've been in this material world for eons, and Krishna's finally, as a human being, we get a chance to understand the real truth of life. And unfortunately, and forgive me if you have some other religion, there's just very scant information. Everything in Krishna consciousness is spelled out very clearly in the books. It's not like we're speculating. We're reading. If the spiritual master says one thing and the book says something different, well, something's off. Okay? So we have, you know, like I say, I grew up a Christian. They have a Bible. What the Bible? Bible is the disciples of Jesus writing down what they realized. Okay, Jesus didn't write books. Prabhupada had 10,000 disciples, and he wrote books. Jesus had a dozen. So there's really no comparison. Although I'm not speaking ill of Jesus at all. He helped me. But Srila Prabhupada did things, and his scope of preaching to hit every nook and corner on the planet. Even during the time of the Cold War in Russia, his vision was not small. His vision was worldwide. And if somebody says that Srila Prabhupada was just in the right place at the right time, then they do not understand what Prabhupada went through to come here. So I can go on forever. But anyway.
That was amazing. That was so wonderful, Prabhu. And to my question, you answered very beautifully how to go home, back home. You know, so your real home. So
Real home.
So is there any question? Okay. So yeah. So thank you. Is there anything else you would like to speak as we close, Prabhu? Or?
Well, if you've never been to a temple or don't have any literature, please contact us. You can also find these things in digital form. I recently downloaded all of Srila Prabhupada's books into a Kindle app on my Android tablet. There's so many ways to associate with devotees, even if you don't live near a temple. There are Zoom classes we have on our channel. There are others around the world. ISKCON in Mayapur, they have a large television channel. You can tune into many different places in the world. The main thing is to associate with devotees. Read Prabhupada's books when you can, and simply chant.
Can you provide some more details on the Kindle app? How can we access that?
I recently was gifted an Android tablet, and they have an app for a Kindle app. So you can download anything into your tablet or phone, whatever. The Kindle app is amazing. You simply swipe one page to the next. It's very easy. Yeah, and they have there are different readers besides the Kindle reader, and they're available in many different formats. And you can look it up on the internet. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you so much, Pavamana Prabhu. We are very grateful to you for your time and sharing so blissful and so fascinating experiences with Srila Prabhupada. And I am very inspired by hearing those, and my faith in Prabhupada has increased tenfolds. So thank you so much.
I wish I could go on speaking forever, to be honest. But it's about a lot of twists and turns now. There are challenges now that Srila Prabhupada has, to our mundane vision, disappeared. He has not disappeared. We can go in the temple room and he's sitting there at the asasan. He is personally present there. Okay, it's not that you Prabhupada disciples had Prabhupada there, but now we can't have Prabhupada's association. No, that's not true. Any more than reading Bhagavad Gita, you're there with Krishna. Krishna speaking to Arjuna. Krishna speaking to Arjuna, so you can hear it. That's the whole idea. So anyone, and I know many devotees who never met Prabhupada, have dreams with Prabhupada in the dream, and Prabhupada's telling them things, instructing them. So Prabhupada is not dead. And Prabhupada said, I live in my books. You read my books, I'm with you. Okay? So it's not that somehow or other, and even Christians say that, they feel a personal presence of Jesus. And that's what we want, is a personal association. And if you can do something that Prabhupada says, and you do it, your connection is tight, right there. We have independence, but if we do what Prabhupada asks us to do, then you're in Prabhupada's presence. Prabhupada said, I'm never apart from my guru. I'm never apart. Because Srila Prabhupada is doing everything that his spiritual master said. And besides that, Prabhupada's on a transcendental level. He's always with Krishna. That was another thing. Being with Prabhupada was to be with Krishna. But he would point out things. It was just amazing. Sometimes Prabhupada would simply lift an eyebrow. He'd be looking in a certain direction. He'd kind of look over there. And it was, what is he looking at, you know? They knew exactly what Prabhupada meant. Prabhupada would say things. I mean, it just goes on and on. You listen to Srila Kirti give lectures, Prabhupada's secretary, or read the Hare Sari's, you know, Transcendental Diary. You could never predict what Prabhupada would say. You'd ask him a question expecting a certain answer. Prabhupada was 10 steps ahead of you. So anyway.
Can you give some example of that?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything at the moment.
That's fine.
But you know, there were things that you know, like I say, Prabhupada would see, you know, or he'd be walking down the street and seeing, you know, that there's a water dripping out of a faucet, or you know, he would notice something. In Mayapur, he'd be on a morning walk, and they didn't have plumbing they just had outhouses. So he was on a morning walk, and he would watch everything. He would observe everything. So he walked back these latrines, and he'd push the door open with his cane and saw it hadn't been cleaned. And all of his secretaries and the senior men are standing around and said, "Why is this dirty?" And then it would become everyone's guilty.
Yeah.
Okay? And so, you know, Srila Prabhupada could be very heavy. He was the heaviest of the heavy. Okay? But there were other times when there was something and Prabhupada would just dismiss it. But, you know, you could never predict what Prabhupada would do. But his, you know, devotees were very keen on everything that Prabhupada indicated. You know, if there was something that Srila Prabhupada was concerned about, devotees would make it their business to try to correct it. You know, and so it was very intense, very, very intense, very, very intense. I mean, like I say, you could not predict anything. Devotees would ask, you know, what's the best kind of service, Srila Prabhupada, because they were book distributors. You know, and then Prabhupada knew what they were hinting at, so he would say, well, becoming Krishna conscious, chanting Hare Krishna, you know, completely deflate the devotee, you know, but he knew everything in perfect time and circumstance. There was one time, Srila Prabhupada had access to some of the richest business magnates in India, and at one time I got to go. We went to there was the Birla family, you know, just multi-billionaires, I guess. Anyway, so he was the perfect gentleman. And it, you know, talk small talk and this and that, you know, perfect guest. And then there was one of the daughters, one lady said, well, Swamiji, what about, you know, and she'd bring out something spiritual. And it's like seeing like Superman, you know, dressed up as Clark Kent. You know, he takes off his coat, he's Superman. So Prabhupada would, you know, suddenly become the guru, you know, and start preaching real heavy, you know. But in perfect time and circumstance. So he could take, you know, the smallest spark and fan it into a flame, right? But if there was something nonsense going on, and there were some things that happened in our movement in the past, and he was just fire and brimstone. I mean, in these lectures at the Pandal, he was fire and brimstone. I mean, you could tell. I mean, you didn't know what the language he was saying, but sometimes he'd quote a verse.
Yeah.
Same verses, you know, the same thing. But he was just laying down the law. He just heavy duty. And of course, at the end, everybody wants to come up and touch his feet and all that. You know, they try to keep him away, you know. But he had so much energy, and just so intense. You know, how, you know, it's like for a Christian, just imagine to be in the presence of Jesus. What a Christian wouldn't do to make that happen. I mean, and we had the opportunity for a few years to be in Srila Prabhupada's presence and write him a letter, Correspondence, I never wrote any letter. And there were some devotees that had very intimate relationships, especially in the beginning, very personal relationships. I didn't. He's my guru. I don't have any business being familiar, okay? But I think a lot of the early devotees were from previous time, and they were just meeting Prabhupada again. And I have no doubt about it. Just like when Krishna comes, demigods were appearing. So that's my position. Anything else?
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Prabhu. And we would like to again thank you so much for coming and sharing with us all your experiences. And thank you so much everyone for watching. And we hope to see you again in our next session with one more devotee. Thank you. Hare Krishna.